Hello, dear friends. This is Kardec Radio at 11 p.m., nourishing our souls with one more Hail Christ. This is a new chapter, a very deep opportunity for us to revisit many aspects of our lives. We welcome all of you to this book, Hail Christ, a book that was psychographed by the medium Chico Xavier, published in 1953. The spirit author is Emmanuel. Emmanuel brings to us true accounts that happened in ancient Rome, the ancient Roman Empire in general. And it's about the 3rd century of our era. We are talking about the families, the dynamics of the times in which cruelty was very much present, in which the material interests have driven people to their daily decisions. And yet, Emmanuel tells us in the preface of this book that this book comes to us talking about the social order in decline and how Jesus goes forth into the world, restoring hope and fraternity so that the sanctuary of love may be rebuilt on its true foundations. Yes. The Lord's work, however, needs resources to implement peace. The divine idea needs human hands. Blessings from heaven require recipients on earth. Spiritism calls for brave souls to sacrifice themselves in order to spread it victoriously. And that's why Emmanuel brings us this book, to inspire you and I to new being. Not that we are wrong, but there's always more. You know, when you are a teacher, you look at a student and you can see the potential and you cheer up when you see it and you boost that in that student. The same for parents and children. You study and you boost it in our children as well. Talking about educators, here comes our dear Leia Severo. Yes, Leia, today is a most special day, March 31st, for 2 reasons. In 1848, on March 31st, the Fox sisters started hearing the communications from the spirit, Charles Rosna. That was in March 31st, 1848. Later, Kardec would also hear about the spirit manifestations, not believing them at first, but later, recognizing that there was something to be investigated. By the way, if you're watching this and you haven't watched the movie Kardec, it's already on Netflix. Watch it, because you're gonna see the history of the making of Spiritism. And after many years of sacrifice and beautiful works, Allan Kardec discarnated on March 31st of 1869. When he was opening the door to receive the printing of the latest Spiritist magazine, Kardec receives it and falls over it, discarnating on that very day. March 31st is certainly a sublime day, a day in which we celebrate the happenings on the new era of Earth, telling us about the real life, the spirit life. You and I are spirits Thank you so much, Leia Severo, for being here with us. And thank you, friends, for joining us. We are here talking about this very moment of redemption. Why are we on earth? We're on earth to redeem ourselves. And you may say, but Vanessa, I listen to this word redemption and redeeming, and what is that about but coupons, right, that you redeem? That's nothing to do with it, of course. But we're talking about ourselves coming back to new experiences, redressing old problems with new solutions, repairing mistakes of the past. You and I are on earth for our own redemption. The only one that came to earth with a clear crystal missionary and nothing but a missionary life was Master Jesus. Hold on a second. I just had to fix some part of the light. So, you and I are here for our own redemption, and our redemption is about the new habits. In this chapter today, chapter 6 of Hail Christ, we're going to travel in time with Quintus Varus, who now is called Brother Corvinus, and his former family. We're going to see how people are able to transform themselves and work day in, day out for their new life. Right now, we are also studying a time on earth where there was an epidemic as well. Yes, it's the plague of the year 233. For 2 years, it was still taking over many lives. And from those years, we're going to see the lives of many of our characters in this book going through such experiences, being healed by the healing powers of the beyond through healing mediums who were Christians at the time. Are you ready for this? Welcome to Kardec Radio, friends. I can see here some of you, and I want to say hi, just so we can feel each other's presence and know that we are here for a greater purpose than just getting to know of a story. Hello, Karina Alice. Hello, Leia Severo, Sol Souza, Sunshine. Hello, Silvio Otero, Jailton, Pérez Soares, Paulo Andrade, Carol Correia, Nora Brasil, John da Rosa, Tissa Silva. Thank you, friends, for joining us. And of course, if you write a comment or a question, feel free to do so, and we'll be addressing here. If you're watching this on demand or listening to this on demand, feel our hug. And if you still have a question or two, no matter how many years have passed the program, you can write to us at kardecradio@gmail.com, and we'll be happy to talk to you and address your questions or your comments, etc. Okay? Chapter 6. Quintus Varus, who is now here in Lyon. Remember, we stopped where he tried to he brought the children to sing to his son, Tassianus. His inner ideal was to see if Tassianus was going to be moved by seeing children praying to Jesus. But when little Sylvanus prayed and said, Jesus our Lord, Tassianus lost it all. He felt that wrath so strong in him that he asked his guards to send the dogs to the children. One of the dogs killed Silvanus. What happened thereafter? Well, hard times befell the church in Lyon after the death of Silvanus. Encouraged by a man who was gospel-hating, Eustathius, the child's mother publicly accused Brother Corvinus of being a sorcerer and a child killer. Of course, the guards took him and questioned him, and he didn't deny anything, but he didn't blame anybody either. And the Roman guards were sarcastic, but Brother Corvinus endured it humbly and heroically. These are important things for us to be aware of. The attitude when Emmanuel describes how these Christians were not only faithful, but they were calm and courageous, and they stood strongly facing those challenges in ways that are sometimes unbelievable to us. These are things to mark down and allow our brains, because remember, we have mirror neurons. When we're reading this, we are, as if we are watching them doing this, we are imprinting those images in us, so one day we can do the same. That's why these books are here for. Neuroscience already proves to us that, and I read papers that are talking about this. This was in the year 2015. When you read novels of this nature, similar to this, it changes our neurobiology. Imaging studies show to us, showing to us that reading specific types of books can be very therapeutic. Now, little by little, we're coming close to understand why Chico Xavier spent so many hours of his life, 75 years of his mediumship, 75 years, in writing mediumistic works. We're here at Kardec Radio. It's been almost 4 years that we have been doing these programs based on Chico Xavier's books. And they have been transforming lives, our lives. This is the true healing. So when we read them, it's not only about the story. It's not about the beauty in itself, but it's about the example, the model that we can emulate as we pay attention to it. So here is something for us to pay attention. He endured it humbly and heroically. But if on one hand we had Romans who were gospel-hating, there were others who were influential and would be protecting the Christians. One of them, Simbris, Artemius Simbris. He used his wealth to advocate and keep people like Brother Corvinus out of prison. But you know what? He was not allowed any longer, Quintus Varus, to take care of children. All of the children he was taking care of, like 30 plus children, they were given to other families to take care of. He couldn't see his son either. So it was hard for Quintus Varus, and that's the description of the it's a very important part for us. Quintus Varus was a masculine standard of good cheer and an example of living faith. But despite his display of spiritual strength, he gave in to the torment that forebodes depression. Between his love for his inaccessible son and his zeal for the children who had been irretrievably taken from him, he suffered frequent and sudden bouts of weeping. He would even stop by in the middle of the night at Tassiana's house and try to see his face in the midst of, some light through the windows. He would try to escape his thoughts by studying intensively and by doing sacrificial works for the sick. Many people, he was not feeding himself properly either, not resting properly, not feeding himself properly, studying very hard, helping people, but sad within himself. What happened? He was exhausted. He had a fever. He was between life and death. It was hard. Deep inside, he had a conflict. So, pause again. Psychosomatics for us. Emmanuel, in his thorough description, shows to us that on the behind the scenes of our physical ailments, there is a mind that has some form of conflict, which is normal because we're humans. It's normal. But once we understand it, we can work with it more straightforwardly. So you see, deep inside, he was angry. He was upset. He was sad. Because Emmanuel shares with us, was his goal of getting close to his son, to devote himself to him, a crime? Was his desire to want his son to love him back reprehensible? Good questions. Was it right to do nothing for the young man who was just starting out in life? Was it wrongful for a father to devote himself to his son with his best intentions? Well, he started feeling the breeze and meditating on that. He recalled the old Corvinus, the man who died in his place. He was sobbing. He bowed over his knees in the exile of his room. He felt that a hand was resting lightly on his shoulders. Perplexed, he lifted his tear-swollen eyes, and how marvelous! The discarnate old man had returned from the dead and was standing right there before him. Clothed in light, he was the same apostle as before, but his body had become more diaphanous and younger. His forehead emitted rays of sapphire light, like a sublime outpouring out of the soul. Quintus Varus was so joyful, but he was mute. There was a force that made him stay in bed, smiling, but with melancholic love. Old Corvinus tells Varus. Now, let's pay attention, because Quintus Varus has questions that you and I have too. Is it fair or not for him to do everything he can to be near his son? Is it fair that he tries to bring his son to the straight path? Is it fair that he expects one day to receive the love back from his son? What do you think? Be prepared. Because right now, we have a lesson for all families. Whether you have children or not, it's irrelevant at this point because it's also about our relationship with our parents. It's for those who have children, but also for all of us who have parents. We need to redefine it all. Be prepared because old Corvinus, in his immortal Christ consciousness, is going to reveal things to us that are probably new and we have never thought about. Ready? Yes? Let's see. He begins. Varus, my son, why are you so dismayed when the fight has just begun? So true, right? Rebuild your strength for the task ahead. Right now, during the coronavirus, many of us are distressed, of course, because our lives have changed and will continue to change. Are we tired? Let's rebuild our strength for the tasks ahead, because this is just the beginning too. We have been called to serve. The love between souls is divine, an eternal bond connecting us to each other from triumphant immortality. But what will become of this heavenly gift if we cannot renounce ourselves? The heart that is unable to surrender itself for the benefit of someone else's happiness is a dry seed that cannot grow. Tassianus is the son of the Creator, just like us. Do not complain about what he cannot yet give you. No one can make themselves loved by demanding it. Give everything. Those we want to help or save are not always able to grasp the meaning of our words right away, but they can be inclined or drawn to renewal by our actions and examples. We are often forgotten and humiliated by those to whom we devote ourselves. But if we know how to persevere in self-denial, we will light the blessed flame in our hearts that will illuminate their way beyond the grave. Nothing in the world is lasting. Lend support to your son, who is also our brother in eternity, but do not consider enslaving him to your own way of being. A tree that decided to devour its own fruit would be monstrous. The fountain that swallowed its own waters condemnable. Varus, look for your son with the burning torch of love in others' children. The Lord will bless you and turn your sorrow into peace of mind. Stand on your own 2 feet and look to the struggle by which you will re-educate the ones you love the most. Do not yield to the icy breath of misery, nor believe in the power of fatigue. What would become of us if Jesus grew weary of our wrongs and gave in to the useless fatigue? Even if your body is given over to the transformation of death, stay firm in faith and optimism. Son, do not expect anything for now, but renunciation and sacrifice. Jesus has not yet been understood even by many who call themselves his followers. Serve others, forgive and wait. The ultimate victories of the Spirit shine beyond the flesh. I know he says much more than that. We're cutting short some pieces here and there. How many lessons, huh? Right? How many lessons? We have parents. Right now, this crisis makes us feel for our loved ones. Fair. But remember, we need to remember, everybody is a child of God. We're temporarily in those roles of parents, children, siblings, relatives in general, friends. The friends of today were family of yesterday, or will become. What we know is that old Corvinus is instructing us to lessons that we need to absorb and feel. I think the highest lesson is how many followers of Jesus yet don't understand Jesus. Here we are. That's why we're studying. But besides that lesson that is always to be kept in mind, the other one is about our wishes. In this chapter, it talks about redemption, which is redeeming our wishes. He wants Tassianus to be with him. To be Christ's follower, it doesn't work that way. We can't demand transformation. He felt depressed out of frustration. This inner conflict, how many of us on earth are depressed, have been depressed, quitting pretty much life, not feeling like partaking in the things of life because we're frustrated that our children are not what we want them to be, or because we don't agree that our parents are who they are, or our spouses or our siblings. And at the end of the day, we're power struggling. That's what we call power struggling. But the worst of it all, we're power struggling with God. Because God is allowing everyone to be that way. Who are we to demand it? You remember how often we demand things from our loved ones in the name of love, and we grow sad and frustrated and depressed, feeling this fatigue, this weariness, like, oh, I try my hard, and yet my husband or my wife or my child or my sibling or my father, my mother. Let us renew ourselves and say, you know, God, here are your children. I will continue supporting them, but I can't power struggle thinking that I have to be the one, the provider. No, the only provider is God. This is humility, because to renounce, to sacrifice, requires humility. We are not able to renounce our free time, our resting, our entertaining hours, or anything material, or even the love that we expect to receive if we're not humble. You know why? Because when we think we're entitled to something, we are stubborn. We don't compromise. We don't renounce. When are we able to renounce? When we feel humbled by the situation. Say, you know, I know that person doesn't love me as I expect yet. But who am I? Who am I to demand love and devotion? And that's how we are able to forgive. Because we look at people and we say, you know, God is above every one of us, and people are doing this to God. I'm not giving people's lives. I'm not giving them life Am I? No. God is, and God doesn't demand. God keeps loving. See how inspirational it is to enter this mindset of the Christ when we contemplate that, okay, God created them as He created me. He loves them as He loves me. He keeps sustaining them in spite of it all as He sustains me in spite of it all. Who am I to demand that this person gives me or does something that I think is right? You see, our pride, it makes us weak. It makes us weak. How can we grow stronger? God. Our family members are children of God, just like everybody else. We do our best without attachment, without entitlement. Without entitlement. We give our best. That's what old Corvinus recommends. He says, recommendations. Give, he says here, give everything, but do not expect anything. Give everything, do not expect anything. Hard, huh? But with God we can do it. With God we can do anything, because we say, God, how can I demand I don't give life to them? How silly am I? No, we can't. It becomes easier. He says, look for your son with the burning torch of love in others' children. That's another lesson. In the upcoming issue of the Spiritist magazine, you're going to read the story, true account of Chico Xavier. Chico Xavier, when he was in the city of Uberaba, in the state of Minas Gerais in Brazil, he was visited by many people who needed help. Amongst them, a woman who came in despair because her teenager wasn't living a very good, healthy life. He asked for help. Emmanuel, consulted by Chico Xavier, turned to her and said through Chico Xavier, go back home, practice charity, and everything will be fine. She didn't understand what he meant. She told her husband, they traveled back home, and they talked to a few friends, still trying to make sense of that counseling. A week later, a friend of theirs calls them up and says, you know, I've come to know of a volunteering opportunity at a prison. How about if we join forces and do it together? They were a little puzzled, but they said yes. And for a while, this woman would bring cake. At that time, they would allow this to happen in the prisons in Brazil. They would allow to talk to the prisoners and to bring cakes to the prisoners. Her husband would give the prisoners a haircut. And they helped these prisoners so much by talking to them, by being friendly. The discarnate mothers of these prisoners were so deeply touched, so moved by this couple's devotion to their children, that they decided to give them a hand. They've got to know that the couple's daughter was surrounded by obsessors. It was then these discarnate mothers joined forces to help liberate their daughter from that impediment. They succeeded. The obsessors were rescued, sent to rehabilitation. Their daughter was back to herself. Because when we're obsessed, we're out of our senses. We start doing things that people find it crazy and weird and strange. We're the only ones who don't see it. The couple didn't know the behind the scenes of it all. They even forgot about what they were counseled by Chico, Xavier, and Emmanuel. But one day, observing the renewal of the daughter, they said, let's go back to Uberaba and thank Chico Xavier. So they came to Chico and said, Chico, thank you so much. Our daughter is anew. Chico smiled. Emmanuel explained to him what happened. He didn't say anything. And he blessed them. In this lesson of the book Hail Christ, we're learning from Old Corvinus that we need to expand our loving capacity. Sometimes we want this one to love us, but something is in the way. So let us expand and love others. Quintus Varus wants to devote himself to Tassianus, but Old Corvinus is saying, expand your love to the children of others. That is going to illuminate like a torch that will help you in the long run with your love towards Tassianus. And so shall it be. Sometimes we don't have our parents here or grandparents. But in the nursing homes, we do have them. Right now, certainly, if one place where people are afraid the most is in a nursing home, they can't be visited because of the coronavirus. What can be done? Maybe you cannot mail a letter because people are afraid of the virus itself. But you can email. You and I can email letters, even if we don't know, to those who are living in nursing homes, asking that the administration sends them these messages. You can write and draw, take pictures of beautiful things, send to them so the administrators can bring them some form of hope. Maybe we can't be with our loved ones in person because we are in separate houses. But we can always reach out to people in so many other ways beyond that little circle of the blood ties. It's not charitable to keep our love and devotion to only a few. We need to devote ourselves to the universal family. And that may come in so many ways. Tonight, Quintus Varus is asking us, yes, as Paulo Andrade is saying, as Chico said, the good we do is our advocate everywhere. Thank you, Paulo Andrade. So true. And as Teresa Castro says here, if we want transformation in others, we need to become the midwives. Wait for the birth. Exactly. That's a beautiful expression, Teresa. So friends, Right now, Quintus Vars and us, we are being educated by old Corvinus. He goes away. Corvinus kisses his hair like a father saying good night to his little son at bedtime. The loving spirits are so kind to us. And moving towards the door, he sent him a touching goodbye. In bed, sickly Verus calmed himself with a sense of peace understandable only to those who have overcome the great inner battles of the heart. He peacefully slept. When he woke up, he was Quintus Varus again. To everyone's astonishment, Varus went to the morning worship service with a sense of joy and gratitude. He had barely finished the usual prayers when he noticed, not far from the atrium, unusual movement among the people. And what was happening? On that very day, the new wife of his son, Helen, was coming to the city of Lyon, the villa of the Venturius. And he said, and Emmanuel tells us that his wife, former Varus' wife Cynthia, the mother of Helen, and not the mother, the stepmother of Helen and the mother of Tassianus, had become Christian. And it was sad news for Tassianus. He got to know that his mother converted to Christianity. She got sick during the plague. She was healed by a healer who was Christian, who taught her many things. Her heart, that was already filled with anguishes, started feeling consoled. She didn't proclaim herself Christian, but when her son, on the night before the wedding, came talking to her, she revealed it to him. Beautiful words, and confessed to him that his father, Quintus Varus, was Christian. At that moment, Tassianus said, "You are mad, you are mentally ill, Mom," and told his stepfather, "My mom is mentally ill," and they were ashamed of her from there on. She was not included in the festivities. In a way, she didn't feel like either. And past the moment of the festivities. Now, the last third of this chapter. Again, each chapter is a lot of emotion. A lot of emotions. The marriage went on. Cynthia was considered to be mentally ill just because she was Christian. And meanwhile, Varus, his fame grew by the day in spite of the Romans' hatred towards him. Another year comes by. The plague is still lashing the Latin world. See, 2 years. 2 years. Terrible clouds of gathering over the workers of the gospel. There is a new emperor. He's a monster. He seized the purple robe, thirsty for blood and power. He persecuted the Christians. Innumerable churches were built with enormous sacrifice, and yet even the Church of Lyon was banned. But Brother Corvinus stayed put. But in Lyon, in the Gauls, some Roman patricians were devoted to executing slaves who were Christians. A specific man, Quaestus Statianus, had this mission in his hand. One day he visited Tassiana's home and invited him to the task force. And Tassiana's stepfather, Vittorius, said, "Yes, we still have a slave in our house who is stubborn." So maliciously, Statianus said, "I know, Rufus, our stubborn long-time acquaintance." Tassianus was called to the opinion, and Tassianus said, "Yes, let's finish with this." Who is Rufus? Now I'm going to show to you. One of the reincarnations of Professor Euripides Barçanufo. Euripides Barçanufo, reincarnated in the 19th century, died in the Spanish flu, 1918, out of helping so many. This man who had an exemplary life in the 19th century was already a Christian mind. Professor Euripides Barçanufo knows Jesus, of course, way before many reincarnations, but when Jesus was incarnated, Euripides Barçanufo was an Essene young mind who met Jesus. From there on, he followed Jesus' footsteps non-stop to these days. It's important for us to see how we become life after life. When we see a medium, somebody who is so sublime in his reincarnation, like Professor Euripides Barçanufo, founding the first Spiritist school, a new method to educate children. We are talking about millennia of experiences. Millennia. Let us keep him in our hearts, because now we're going to see what happened to him in that very life. He had a wife and children. Rufus had wife and children. He was brought in. By the guards. Remember, why are they doing this? Besides being cruel, they are afraid. They say slaves are passive instruments for work, and an instrument cannot reason for itself. We are the ones who are responsible. It's our duty to do something. We can't forget to say that Jesus' teachings empowers us in terms of our reasoning. It's not only the heart, but it empowers us in our reasoning, in our discernment. And they were afraid that those slaves were becoming instructed, that they were becoming wise, that they were becoming empowered in so many ways. They wanted to oppress them. On a scheduled day, their last attempt to reform Rufus came up. They made it a solemn event. The slaves would not be spared the final scene. So they brought everybody. They brought Rufus, and they planned on selling his wife and the 2 little daughters, and at the moment he would be marked to death. They come, and Emmanuel describes the scene. The little kids, the wife named Dioclasia, and the 2 little daughters, Rufilia and Dionia. They hugged their father and said, "Papa, Papa." Their sweet voices echoed poignantly, eliciting tears, while the slave kept wept openly, the tears flowing from his eyes like diamond drops of dew rolling down his expressive bronze face. The family was separated. Opelia's voice rang out. Remember, Opelius is the stepfather of Tassianus. He says, Rufus, the decisive moment has come. Swear allegiance to the gods, and you'll be spared. Follow the Galilean impostor, and you'll be put to death. Your family will be banished forever. Choose this second. What does Rufus say? The servant cried, falling to his knees. Oh, sir, please do not condemn me. Have mercy. I have been a slave in this house since I was born. Overcome with anguish, the poor man felt silence, lowered to his once erect and proud head into the dust of Vittoria's feet. Never mind the past. This is now. Why the Nazarene illusion, when our gods have given you plenty of bread and happy life? Rufus raised his head and regained his composure. He looked at his wife, who was gazing at him sorrowfully, and then held out his arms to Dionia, a sweet dark-skinned 4-year-old, who rushed to him asking trustingly, "This is hard. Aren't you coming with us, Papa?" Wow. Rufus looked at the little girl with unspeakable tenderness, but did not answer. No one could imagine the drama going on behind that face furrowed by suffering. His motionless eyes had stopped weeping. Opelius then said, stop stalling. Will you not deny the Nazarene superstition and despise the impostor of the cross?" And Rufus says, possessed with impressive calm, "The gospel is divine revelation, and Jesus is not a deceiver, but the master of eternal life." "How dare you?" interrupted Vittorius angrily. "Your death will be nothing more than suicide, and you'll be the execution of your own family." "You miserable wretch, aren't you afraid? Now listen to the words. I'll read it through before we break down. Feel it. It's more than the knowledge, it's the feeling. It's like feeling the Christ-conscious mind. Sir, those who are born to die are staring the truth in the face. It grieves my heart to see my wife and my daughters humiliated by the uncertain fate that awaits them on earth. However, I'm handing them over to the Judge of heaven. You may condemn me today. The house, land, trees, and gold will remain in your hands. But tomorrow you'll be called to settle accounts at the divine tribunal. Where are those who persecuted and condemned in other times? They have all become dust. Where servants and masters are mingled together, the litters of vanity and pride rot over time. I do not fear death, which for you is an enigma and mystery, but for me freedom and life. You mention my wife and daughter's lamentable situation. In view of your decision to exile them to other lands, however, with the respect that your family has always deserved, I am led to ask about your own ancestors. Where might your parents be living today? You're separated from them as I will be from my family from now on. And while your longing wanders like a useless shadow hunting your days, my wife's suffering as well as my own, will give us the comforting assurance that we are taking part in the building a better world. Yes, we're slaves, born under the heavy yoke of cruel captivity. Even so, our minds are free to worship God according to our understanding. Other friends before us have known martyrdom, have many been killed in circuses, etc., 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 etc. Shut up, not another word. Epipodas the whip. From there on, it's just cruelty. Rufus was about to be tied behind the animal, which was whining and kicking. Right? They are talking about a wild horse. When the slave merchant approached and whispered in his ear, "Your family shall have a home with us in Aquitaine. Die in peace, I too am Christian." It's so beautiful, this part, to see that he's gonna die knowing that his family is going to be well. He's trusting God that his wife and family would find God's, turning them to God, but fulfilling his duty. Of course, Rufus had been set free to serve the Lord's purposes more securely. He is sacrificed, and we pause for a second. We pause for a second for our own reflections. That's the highlight of our redemption. You and I have duty before God. Each of our family members do too. When we are faced with the fulfillment of our duties, the sacrifices and renunciations that pertain to the fulfillment of our duties, would we choose what Rufus has chosen? To the linear ancient Roman mindset, and to the mindset of many nowadays, Rufus was suicidal, and he was merciless towards his own family. In the eyes of God, he believed in God. In the Christ consciousness, he loved God above all things. How could he deny Jesus at a moment when we needed to do it? I know many people who claim to be spiritists, but they are afraid of talking about spiritism. They want to be accepted by everybody. They don't want to be weird. They hide their convictions in their social media. They share people doing everything, but they don't or ever share things that are spiritists. This is the time of the plague, when we're being brought to moments like this. Maybe we don't have a cruel scenario like this, but others. As a scientist, I know myself that many people may not understand. Who cares? If we don't do this, how will people get to know of it? Many people ask, I don't understand why people don't know more about spiritism in the US and in the world. You know why? Because we don't talk about it. Because we're not courageous enough. because the day we are and face the consequences, we will get to know of Spiritism. Now it's the best time to do it. Professor Euripides Barçanufo, in that reincarnation, teaches us the courage to stand up for our conviction. Not to enforce, proselytize, oppress, no, but share. And if you're being asked to share at this time, because Spiritism certainly has consoling messages, it's your turn, wherever you are, to share that message. People look at you with strange eyes, thinking you're crazy. Wait. And as May says, love always. Wait and love always. Because one day, they as well will come to this pathway. It's the only pathway. In the next 24 hours, we're being asked to keep this exercise in mind and think, how can I stand up with courage before my convictions when I'm called to the testimony before people in my life, including social media? That's the exercise in the next 24 hours. We're being called to continue this legacy, just to be whom we've decided to be, and sharing the best of us. If we don't do this, we won't be helping. It's up to us. That's the exercise in the next 24 hours. Moved by the calmness of Rufus, his courage, his surrender to God. Let us also surrender to God, friends, and trust that God is taking care of us. This book shows us how beautiful it is in two realms. The benefit of this interdependency amongst us, taking care of all of us. Your life is secure, my life is secure, all of our lives. We just need to do our share. So let us all now raise our thoughts and thank God for the much we have been given, and especially for being given this testimony of Professor Euripides Barçanufo. May his courage and calmness, his serenity, remain with us. And may we visualize our planet Earth being enveloped by these waves of serenity that are deeply healing, calming everybody down, making everybody feel loved, protected. Thank you, God. Thank you, thank you. And so be it. Thank you, friends. What a joy. So many emotions. You're right, Soul Souls. I love to be Spiritist. We love to be universal citizens. Spiritism is universal consciousness. Let us share it. Let us stand up to share the best we have been given. Thank you, friends. Let us continue our march in our redemption, loving always, giving everything, as old Corbina said. A big hug to you. Until tomorrow, God willing.